Welcome to Hound Headlines for the week of March 7th, 2023. I'm James Jacobson in Maui, Hawaii.
And I'm Claire Mansell in London, England. Today on the podcast,
we are talking about strange laws that legislators are enacting to keep dogs from doing things that dogs do naturally.
And Bisbee, the English setter, has proudly stepped up to claim a Guinness Book of Records world record for having the longest tongue.
And in an editorial piece, one journalist asks people to stop misgendering her dog. So we ask, do dogs even have a gender?
This episode is brought to you in association with our sponsors, Everpup.
Here's a story from Merry England.
Is she our correspondent? She sounds like Merry England with a middle name Old.
That's a crummy middle name, yes. Yeah. From the United Kingdom. What's happening there? What did you pick up?
Well, this was an article which I spotted, which is more of a kind of like an editorial article rather than a news article. But a journalist wrote about people misgendering her dog, and this does happen a lot, particularly if you have a female dog. And it got me thinking all about the whole role of dogs and gender. So her complaint is that when you meet a dog in the park or when you're talking to an owner, they naturally assume that dogs are male. That is always the first assumption. They will say, how old is he? What has happened to his leg in the case of Maple? And with cats, they tend to assume that they're female. So there is a whole bag of worms here because we're deep into the gender debate in the world. But do dogs have a gender? So we wanted to kind of pick that apart on this part of the show and just have a little discussion about dogs and gender. So over to you. Do you think dogs have a gender?
Gender. I think this engenders a conversation about what is gender, what is sexuality, what is femininity and masculinity. And I think they're all very convoluted in some minds. In my mind, they're kind of clear. But when it comes to our dogs, it doesn't really matter because I don't think they go through life associating one thing versus another. To me, it's really about there are some masculine traits and there are some feminine traits and there's some more androgynous traits, and you can have a little mixture of all sorts of things. And to me, that's the natural order of things. That's what happens naturally. But we have covered on Dog Podcast Network in the past, people who really get into this in a big way and want to make sure that their dogs are macho, and even after they're fixed, they get nudicles, basically fake balls.
I'd never heard of these. Yeah. Is this just an American thing?
Probably only certain parts of America, but yeah.
For anyone who doesn't know what they are, can you just explain? I know it's a bit graphic and horrible. But
basically, fake balls. They're cosmetic testicles that are surgically inserted into the area where the testicle was removed when the dog was fixed.
Yeah.
And it's, as you can imagine, pretty controversial because, not every veterinarian agrees to it. Is clearly cosmetic surgery for dogs, but people do it for no health benefit. Obviously, they only do it for the fact that they want their dog to walk around with large balls.
But this then wanders into this whole idea of people using dogs as kind of props to display their own gender identity, essentially. And this is so you're talking about men and their muscly big dogs who are strong and threatening.
With like spiked collars, right?
Yeah.
And chains and big chains, like industrial sized chains that could haul a car, and that's your leash.
Yeah. And then of course there's this sort of whole trend for like more and more muscly dogs and breeding more and more, and this is of course a terrible trend because a lot of dogs are suffering as a result of it. But on the other side of things, you've then got a certain type of woman who likes to have a very feminine looking dog, and they will have a sparkly collar and they'll have a pink leash, and you can literally get tutus for dogs. And I've seen, and handbag dogs, of course, seen as very feminine, even, so it is a really interesting thing. And I did look up, you were raising the question of what is gender, and I looked it up because I wanted to be clear about it. But gender, according to the definition, is typically referencing social and cultural differences. So it's
Hmm.
not what you're born as, it is how you present to the world. And a dog does not alter its own appearance in order to be more, humans put that upon them,
Right.
but they don't.
They may rub themselves in some dirt or even better smelling stuff, but they're not really doing it for any gender identification.
No, they're not thinking, I want to grow my hair longer or work on my beach waves or,
Right.
walk in a certain way to be more masculine or more feminine. So I really don't think that dogs have gender. And therefore, this idea of misgender, of calling them the wrong thing and it being offensive is totally us, isn't it? It's totally the dog owners.
I think so. I think we project a lot of things on our dogs, including some of our own inappropriate ideas about gender, feminism, masculism, machismo. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
these are expressions because this goes to one of my biggest pet peeves, pun intended, dressing up dogs in the first place. Unless your dog really needs to be warm because you live in a very cold place, I'm just not a big fan of costumes for dogs.
So the conclusion to all of this is dogs don't have a gender. They have a sex, but they don't have a gender. And this is something we put upon them. And so therefore, the whole misgendering thing, just get over it.
Yeah, those British newspapers. What's he talking about?
Next, we're off to Florida.
Florida, the bottommost state of America, kind of. They come up with some interesting rules and interesting proposed legislation all the time. Currently, there is a bill before the state legislature that proposes a ban on dogs from hanging their heads out of car windows.
So this is more than just that, isn't it? It's all about kind of safely traveling with your pet. So this is a health and safety thing, and it just happens to include dogs hanging their heads out of windows.
That's the most newsworthy, but it's a whole litany of things that if this bill becomes a law in Florida, would make it illegal for dogs to do, and therefore the people who own the dogs to have their dogs engage in certain activities, such as
Such as being unharnessed in the car, not being in a crate, that kind of stuff. So the foundation behind this is kind of sound. It's about keeping dogs safe, which is a great thing, which I love. But also, we're getting into that dangerous territory of legislating everything and taking the joy out of life. And I think all of us who have seen a dog hanging its head out of a window um, knows what joy they get from it. And so we were talking, weren't we, about how there have been certain occasions where health and safety has snuck in on dog related things. And the one I always think about is every now and again a dog chasing a stick will get the stick in its mouth and it will pierce its tongue or hurt its inside of its mouth. And then there will be this crazy thing on social media where they'll say, don't throw a stick for a dog ever. Go out and get one of those rubber substitutes for a stick because your dog will be hurt. But
I wonder if there's any commercial interest in that.
probably. But it's sad, isn't it? Because lots of dogs love getting a stick. And the other classic one is I was having a conversation with somebody in a park about my dog who loves to run. And I said, oh, I'm concerned because I don't want her running too much. I'm worried that, when she's older, her joints might suffer as a result
Mhm.
of it. And this person said to me, oh, it's not the running you need to worry about. It's the sudden stopping when you throw them a ball. And so therefore what you should do is just never throw them a ball in the park. They were deadly serious.
Mhm.
And my dog is ball obsessed. And she clearly would much rather have a life full of balls and retrieving balls that's slightly shorter
Mhm.
than have a long life with no balls in it. I am talking about
There's a
rubber
bumper
balls.
sticker there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
long life with no balls. Back to nudicles. But But anyway, so what do you think about this? Because as I say, it's like it's health and safety. It's fundamentally it's good, but
It's well intentioned, and I think what's interesting to me is, knowing a little bit about some of the, s- in my opinion,
Mhm.
silly stuff that comes out of Florida. That this is coming from Florida, which is kind of like do whatever you want, but clearly not what you want when it relates to dogs. Now, there's a component of this proposed legislation that I'm all in favor with, which is establishing a registry of people who are convicted of animal abuse. And I
Oh,
think that's kind of
yeah,
good. But I think that, does letting your dog and getting a ticket and a fine and going for letting your dog stick its head out of a window,
yeah,
is that worthy of animal abuse? No. Is letting a dog, there's all sorts of things that people want to legislate, uh, which is wrong. I think the United States is particular. I don't know if the UK is as gaga about this as the US, but
not
uh,
really.
the Germans I know have often laughed at American laws
Mm.
that, basically in here in the United States we have printed on coffee cups, caution, contents may be
Oh
hot.
yeah, yeah,
uh
yeah,
Germans laugh at that, and then also they, like knives may be sharp.
yeah.
Caution, knives may be sharp. These are things that many people around the world think we're a little too careful about, and
Yeah, and this definitely falls into that category. And it's interesting because I looked online at weird laws relating to
yes,
dogs, and I thought
not
I
just
thought,
Florida though.
I thought I might struggle with this. It turns out not. It turns
No.
out there's quite a lot of weird rules relating to dogs. So in Hartford, in Connecticut, it is illegal to educate your dog. So
Now I,
I
I
don't.
saw that. I do. Have we dug into this? The basis for this very important law in Hartford, Connecticut.
I guess they're just worried about dogs taking over the town if they have too much knowledge. But I
Uh,
mean, where is the line on education? Because training is a form of
I,
education.
we really need to. This feels
Yeah.
like something that we need to investigate. So there's some other things. In Alaska, it is illegal to tie a dog to the roof of your car, and animals must not enter beauty salons. So you cannot get your dog done up at a beauty salon in Alaska, nor can you put it on the roof of your car.
Can you not take it to the beauty salon if it's a poodle? Because you know who
I
they have
not
the
according
big.
to our crack team of researchers, but I really like the idea that, I mean, maybe that makes sense, is that you shouldn't be able to strap your dog to the top of the
Why would you
car.
do that? Why would you do it?
It needs to be legislated because
How many times did it happen before someone said, "We need to put that into law. You must not put your dog on the roof of the car."
uh,
Now
yeah,
Sweden, obviously, great Scandinavian country. And initially, I read this rule and I thought that's just weird. And then I realized that maybe a bit of it's been lost in translation because essentially what they're doing is laying out the fundamentals of a certain level of care that a dog must receive in a doggy care daycare center, and then it makes a lot more sense. So any dog attending a daycare center in Sweden must be able to see out of a sunny window. And I
mm.
think what they're saying is like a light window, essentially, one that's letting in daylight. So it must be able to see out and see like proper daylight, not through a window at a brick wall, for instance.
My favorite one now is in your own country, in the United Kingdom. There is a law, Clara, that defies all the other laws that we've been talking about, I think, that it is illegal to let your pet mate with a pet from a royal household.
This also weirdly made me think of the royal sort of grandchildren as well, and how they they must have had to control who mated with the royal grandchildren. I've always thought that that would be very awkward if they sort
It
of
is
produced any
illegal.
offspring. Exactly.
Ah,
So generally, just don't let anyone in your household, whether it's canine or human, mate with the royal family without their consent.
a decree from the king. I'm presuming that one's probably hundreds of years probably older than the United States is a
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now, I would love to know if anyone listening to this has got any weird laws where they live, because I'm
your local
sure,
jurisdiction, yeah.
yeah, or even down to cities have strange laws. Like, for instance, I know in Ottawa you can't have more than 3 dogs in a household. That's like a city bylaw. And I mean that's kind of sensible, but there are
Mhm,
little rules in little areas around the world, and I'd love
mhm.
to know them. So you can always, get in touch with us via dogpodcastnetwork.com or on social media. We would love to hear them.
Next, we're off to Tucson, Arizona, where we look at a Guinness Book of World Records record.
So Bisbee, the English setter, has become the latest in a long line of living dogs who have become world record holders for having the longest tongue. So this tongue, which is very impressive, not always on display, only on display when Bisbee is very, very excited or very hot. Um,
Mhm.
Measures 3.74 inches. So it's got to be a joke in this somewhere. Jim's going to go, how long's 3.74 inches, Jim? Or 9.49 centimeters. And this is a 3-year-old dog.
Yep.
How do you think they measured the tongue?
Carefully.
No, but I mean, quite seriously.
Like, you mean how far back does
No,
it go? Because
no,
tongues,
no, no, because they measure it. They measure it from where it hangs out of the mouth
right,
to the end of it, right? But
right,
how do you actually do that? Bearing in mind that when a dog has a tongue hanging out, it's panting, it's
right.
probably not standing still, the tongue wags around and all that kind of stuff. So, it's a genuine question. How do you think they did it?
I don't know. Here's what I would do.
Yeah.
I would use I would give it something to lick, and then I would photograph it, and then be able
Oh,
to calibrate things. But that's my high tech solution
oh,
how to do it. What do they
oh.
do?
Well, when I read this initially, I I read it and I jumped to a conclusion too early in what they were saying. They said they sedated the dog, and I was like, "That's horrific. You can't sedate a dog just to measure the tongue." But it
Yeah,
turns out they were sedating the dog for something completely unrelated.
yeah.
It was an operation the dog was having, and
Oh,
while the dog was sedated, the owner, who I think they don't say this, but I think she must be a vet or a veterinary nurse, said, "I think my dog has got the world's longest tongue." So they got a tape measure out because the dog was like, on the operating table, and they
mhm.
measured it, and obviously then took the record, took the photo. But that's how they did it. Because I was thinking, how on earth would you do it? But it was the dog was asleep at the time.
So let's all us. If you think your dog might have a long tongue, you know, ask for a little general anesthesia.
Jim, seriously, seriously now, Maple
Mm,
is being spayed in a couple of months'
okay.
time. And
Ooh.
so I was like, well, she's gonna be under. Is my vet gonna think I'm really weird if I ask if they could measure her tongue while she's
Not if you give him access to this podcast and understand that it's all in the interest of earning yourself a Guinness Book of World or Maple, a Guinness
Yes.
Book of World Records record.
Yes. But wouldn't it genuinely,
Mm,
I'm dead serious about this. I don't think you're taking me seriously enough.
no,
Wouldn't
not clearly not.
Wouldn't it be really interesting to know? Because this is a bit of a once in a lifetime opportunity. I'm hoping she's not going to undergo anesthesia,
Right.
again anytime soon. And it's
Yeah.
coming up in a couple of months. Wouldn't it be interesting to know, even if she's not the world record holder, where she stands on that? Because it's 3.74 inches. Wouldn't it be interesting?
I totally support that. And I promise that day that will be the least invasive part of the
Yeah,
procedure.
that's true. But
I think she was like, oh, well, I gotta just stuck my tongue out. But what did you do? Yeah.
no, I want a photo, because
Okay.
even if it turns out she's like
I
three,
I think you should get into the
yeah,
surgery as they
yeah,
call it there. I think you should be there. You should be in your, mask and scrubs or whatever they outfit,
with my
and
TPN.
your your DPN microphone and these are not props. We will be using these later this year. And your tape measure and making sure that you can record for the
So
Guinness
this
book
is this
is
is accelerated
momentous.
quickly. So now I'm actually going to ask to be in the operating theatre to measure my own dog's tongue.
I I think that you wouldn't wanna take it secondhand. I
Oh,
think
that's
you really wanna
okay.
be there for it. It's worthy.
Am I
And
not?
then we need some Yeah.
Will I have to scrub up and then, like, walk into the room like this, like they do on the surgery programs, you know, where you walk in?
I don't know how sterile your vet hospital is, but the ones that I've witnessed, not so much.
Right. Well, you know, watch this space. I am going to run it by my vet, who is obviously going to think I'm a lunatic, but I want to know how long my dog's tongue. And
It's all in the interest of science and, entertainment.
I fear that if I'm not there personally to oversee this, that they're going to come out and they're going to say, "Well, Maple recovered very well for the operation." And I'm going to say, "How long was her tongue?" And they go, "Oh, we forgot."
It's not on our standard op we check the anesthesia, we check the sutures, and we didn't know. Oh, oops.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why you have to be
Oh,
there,
okay.
Claire. You
Okay.
have to be there to measure and bring your own measuring instrument.
I will be that pushy pup parent. That's not easy to say
Yeah,
that. Now,
yeah.
in the interest of talking about world records, because there are
Mm,
quite a lot of them to do with
mhm.
dogs,
There are.
I had a look at a few of them. The highest jump by a dog, there was a photograph that went with this, and it's incredible. So this is a dog who jumped. How tall are you?
I'm 6'1", so it jumped higher than I am.
It jumped six
Yeah,
foot three.
yeah.
Um, and this is a greyhound.
Which if you're following at home, 191.7
The
centimeters.
photo of this dog, and the owner was shorter than 6'3" as well, and it just effortlessly just cleared this thing. It was incredible. You want to do the tennis ball one? That's quite cool.
Yes, the tennis ball one. The world record for the most tennis balls held in the mouth by a dog at one time is 5. 5, that's not it. Augie, who is a golden retriever who's owned by the Miller family in Dallas, Texas, successfully gathered and held all 5 regulation-sized tennis balls in July of 2003, so about 20 years ago. But 5 tennis balls doesn't I've seen some hey,
It's a lot. 5 tennis balls.
is
How
it?
many tennis balls can you hold in your mouth?
I'd rather not say.
True story, and I am diverting a lot on
Yeah.
this conversation,
This is
but
clearly where we are on this show.
I met my husband when I was midway through a competition, not tennis
Mhm.
balls, to see how many Pringles I could fit in my mouth.
No way.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, and so how many Pringles did
I
you have in your
I
mouth?
I wish I could remember this detail, but it got lost in the midst of time. But there I was, if you can imagine, all these Pringles. He was not put off by this, came over. I mean,
I was gonna say
it was a drunken evening, but, you know,
yeah.
came over and then attempted to see how many Pringles he could fit in his mouth. It's very hard because they're very drying, by the way. Um, he told me many years later that the whole putting Pringles in his mouth thing had nearly backfired terribly because he'd nearly been sick. So
Well, you would have found that attractive. I
no,
had no idea. This is important ways of meeting people. So,
exactly. So I
okay, so
yeah.
I did and nor did I know that was one of your talents, which is
Well,
pretty extraordinary too.
I don't know if there's a space for that in the Guinness Book of Records. I mean, there's dogs and tennis balls, but
Pringles?
not Pringles. I'm not so sure.
Well, those are the Hound headlines for this week.
And we would love to hear from you if you have any Hound headlines of your own. If you spot anything during the week, the easiest way if you spot it on social media is just tag us in the comments of something that you see on social media. Or if you want to send us an email, you can get in touch with us via dogpodcastnetwork.com. Our sponsor for this episode was Everpup.
Everpup is the ultimate daily dog supplement. A little sprinkle of green powder on your dog's food every day helps get the vitamins and minerals and prebiotics and probiotics and dietary adaptogens that your dog needs. You can try Everpup by going to everpupclub.com, enter the code DPN for Dog Podcast Networking, and you can get your first jar of Everpup for only $8. That's a full month supply for most dogs. And if you have a small dog, that is a 2-month supply for just $8. Everpupclub.com.
And may possibly make your dog a world record holder. I mean, we can't guarantee that, but it could. Could it be the vital ingredient to get them a world record? You never
No,
know.
but it does taste good, and you can watch the dog's tongue going. And then if you get the camera out,
Oh,
like
yeah.
I suggested, versus general anesthesia, and then calibrate things, you may be able to
Yeah.
calculate your dog's tongue, but not as precisely as Claire's going to do later this year. Well, that really is all the time we have for today. I want to thank you so much for joining us. I'm James Jacobson in Maui, Hawaii.
And I'm Claire Mansell in London, England.
On behalf of all of us here at Dog Podcast Network, we want to wish you and your dog a very warm aloha.